Hi. So it is 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of March, and welcome to this Facebook Live. Now, when you jump on, please say hi so I can know that you're here, and we'll just give a few moments for people to get involved and to get to jump on. I have to be punctual because, of course, this is this is my event, but everyone else can come in at their own time, in a sense. Hi, Tracy and Xiaolian. Hi, welcome. Thank you. So, what I want to talk about today is, as you know, hi, Laura, Julie. Excellent. I'm very well, thank you. I've been. Xiaolian asks, "How are you today?" Well, actually, I've been working at home today, and I've been creating a free gift for you. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. And once Gillian jumps on, we'll talk about a problem that she mentioned, and I'll offer some thoughts about that. So some of you are in the Anxiety Wizard program, and some of you are in the Mental Health Wizard Facebook group. As you know, I put a video out every day, and it's quite interesting actually, because when you do stuff, it kind of like develops. Hi, Roxanne. When you do stuff, it like develops your thought processes, you know. And I've been reading some books recently about the vagus nerve, which is, quite heavily implicated, I think, in anxiety problems and whatnot. And it makes me realize even more so, and I want to kind of like talk about this with you. It makes me realize that anxiety is an entirely internal world problem. Now, when you think about anxiety, the kind of the general theme about what I'm talking about today is why it seems hard to overcome anxiety. Okay, so I'm sort of talking about why it seems hard to overcome anxiety. Hi, Shana. Hi, Faye. One of the reasons is we're looking in the wrong place for a solution. What does that mean? Well, I look at some Facebook groups. Sometimes, you know, I get alerts and things from various things, and I'm always, hi, Louise Carolyn. Hi, Dave. I'm always really surprised at the extent to which people are relying on drugs. You know, I've got escitalopram. How is sertraline for you? How is Seroxat for you? And it's almost entirely focused on an external solution for an internal problem. So, as you know, hi, Darlene. As you know, there are two realities. There's external reality, which is the bookcase behind me, and there's internal reality. I want you to recognize and to realize that anxiety is entirely an internal world problem, right? Anxiety is in here, and entirely in here. It's not at all out there. And it really needs to be as kind of so you really need to recognize it and own that, right? Because that's the real trick to making anxiety something that you can work towards getting rid of and get rid of, or at least reduce it significantly and live with it. You know, you can do something with it as long as you recognize that it's an internal world problem, and therefore there are no solutions outside of you that are going to be helpful. So I'm going to jump into talking about why it seems hard to overcome anxiety. So the first thing I want to say is this: we have to change our attitude. Hi, Louise. We have to change our attitude to anxiety to gain mastery over it. So you may have seen one of my previous videos, and it basically is this. It says, you are not the problem, but you have a problem. Now, one of the biggest problems I see when people come to see me for anxiety is that they do not realize that they are not the problem. They feel that they are the problem, right? They believe that they are the problem, and they have believed that they are the problem for 50 years. I mean, just remarkable amounts of time, right? They have thought that they are the problem, and they have tried to access external world solutions, which obviously haven't worked because they're seeing me, 10, 15, 20, 30, even 50 years later. So when someone says, I've always had struggles with anxiety, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, you have to go, well, okay, whatever you're doing isn't working for you. And so we've got to recognize that you are not the problem, but you have a problem, and your problem is anxiety, and that is this problem that we need to work on. That is the problem that we need to kind of focus our attention on. Hi, Sean. So, what is it that you're frightened of? Let me ask you that question. What is it you're frightened of? Now, I know, some of you have had communication, so I would know, for instance, that some of you are frightened of various things, but I'm just going to pull a few things out. Hi, Dave. You might be frightened of roads. You might be frightened of motorways. You might be frightened of lifts. You might be frightened of crowds. You might be frightened of embarrassment. You might be frightened of toilets. You might be frightened of failure, but that's a bit more tricky in a sense. Many people are frightened, fearful of external things. Okay. Now, if you were to say, for instance, I'm frightened of motorways, are you actually frightened of a motorway? What do you think? Yes or no? So someone comes to see me, I'm frightened of motorways, I can't drive on motorways. Are they actually frightened of a motorway? What do you think? Yes or no? Anyone got an answer? Yes or no? Are they actually frightened of motorways? Yes, darling, you can work on the problem whilst you're on medication. Many people are on medication. It's really, really common. Well, here's the answer. And I think this is a legitimate answer. They're not frightened of motorways. They're frightened of their response should they find themselves on a motorway. You get the difference, right? Yeah, well done, Shelley-Ann, you got it. Someone says, I'm frightened of motorways. They're not. They're frightened of their response when they get on the motorway or when they think about getting on the motorway. So actually, it's not a motorway they're frightened of. It's not an external thing that they're frightened of. It's an internal thing, right? So you have to recognize that there is probably nothing that you're fearful of that is external to you. And if there's nothing that you're fearful that's external to you, that means that you have the ability, because it's all inside you, right? You have the ability to change your experience to be, like more or less what you want, let's say. So if we're thinking about the things that make it hard to get past anxiety and depression and panic, it's all similar kind of thing. The things that make it hard, we flip them over and it makes it easier, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to have a mindset shift. And I'll just shorthand it for you to say that you are not the problem, but you have a problem. And your problem is that you have anxiety or panic or whatever. And that problem is the thing that we need to work on. We need to reconfigure, in a sense, the beliefs that we have about our experiences. So if you think of it like this, you would normally assume that when you think, you tend to think in language, and you would normally assume that your thinking process solves problems, right? That would be the normal assumption, right? So I worry about something and that solves a problem. But that's actually not how your brain works. There's tons of studies oh, hi, Spencer. There are tons of studies that show that what actually happens is your brain makes decisions behind the scenes. That decision comes forward into, let's say, the bit of your brain that's consciousness. And I tend to think of it at the front. I don't think it is at the front, but I tend to think of it as the front. And then your consciousness takes ownership over it. So it's a bit like this. It's a bit like if you're watching a football game and there's a commentator commentating on the play. So, he's got the ball and he's going off to the sort of halfway line or whatever, right? You're watching the game and you're listening to the commentator. The commentator is watching the game, thinking about it, commentating. You're hearing the commentator, and then you're processing that. But you're watching the whole thing as a single thing, in real time, in a sense. The commentator, the commentary is behind the play. So does that make sense, right? The commentary is behind the play, although you don't really notice that as a fact, but it has to be. And that's the way that your brain works. That's the relationship between your brain and your mind. Your brain makes decisions. They pass into let's say, your commentator, and your commentator commentates on them. And so in a sense, everything that you say inside of your head is a predetermined thing. It's very hard, therefore, to imagine that you have the level of free will that you think you have, which is kind of interesting, I think. So our brain, rather than our mind, pushes negative thoughts about ourselves, and it pushes them into the commentator. So it puts them into the commentator's voice, right? So the commentator says, you're useless, you're a failure, nobody likes you, it's all going to go terribly wrong, it's going to be rubbish, you won't be able to cope, you won't be able to cope if you go on the motorway, it's all going to be horrible. Okay, now what we need to do then is we need to recognize that that our brain is generating habitual negative thoughts. I call them ants, automatic negative thoughts. Highlands, our brain is negative thoughts, and it's passing them through to us, and we're then just narrating them inside our head and believing them. And we believe what we tell ourselves. When I work with someone, and I'm sure that you've by now you've got the idea watching my videos and things. Just because you think something doesn't make it true. Just because you feel something doesn't make it true. Much of what we believe about ourselves is wrong. You know, it's biased, it's negative, or whatever. It's wrong. And if you've got a psychological problem like panic, anxiety, depression, stress, that is caused by these wrong beliefs. But the thing is, if you don't challenge them, if you don't think, aha, okay, I think this about myself, but it is not true, then you will continue to believe it, and that will keep you stuck. So if someone comes to me and they've had 20 years of anxiety, 30 years of anxiety, right? I know for a fact that they have negative thoughts about themselves and about their ability to cope, and they believe those negative thoughts to be true. Well, if you believe those negative thoughts to be true, what can you do, right? They don't come to me to change their thoughts. They don't come to me to change their well, let's say they don't come to me to change their thoughts. They come to me to find a way of coping with the negative thoughts that they have, because they still believe they're true. It's only when I go, yeah, but that's not actually true, is it? And they go, oh, no. And I certainly I've got to force people to say it's not true. I've got to be a bit tricky and right. Is it true? Are you a failure? No. Right. Okay. So coming back, bouncing around back again, part of the mindset shift is that we have to recognize that we have negative thoughts about ourselves which are not true. We believe them, but if we believe them, then they have power over us, and then that means it's really hard to shift, right? So I find people a lot of the time are saying, you know, what can I do? Okay, what can I do to to not be anxious anymore? Well, a good piece of advice that is really powerful would be stop believing the negative stuff you tell yourself. Well, no, but can you give me some, like, tell me something, give me a tool, give me something a bit easier. Right. But if you continue to believe the negative things that you think about yourself, if you accept them as being true, you will always have the problem that you have, because these are a big element in creating the problem. Now, it's interesting, this, and I'm a bit, I have to say, I'm a bit stumped about this, and you can, by all means, share with me. I'm not completely sure why anxiety is increasing. I'm not completely sure why depression is increasing. I'm not completely sure why life expectancy is stalling. And I'm not completely sure why illness, the kinds of things that we talk about, increases your mortality. I put an email out earlier in the week about that. So whatever it is we're doing, or whatever it is the system at large is doing, is not really working all that well for us, because anxiety and depression are increasing. Okay, so what can we do about it? Well, first of all, I've said that we need to have a mindset shift. Second of all, I've said that we need to stop believing the negative things we say to ourselves, right? You can easily establish that, just pick something, the most negative, I would typically say, the most negative thing you believe about yourself. You can easily establish that that's not true. If you have the courage to look at it, and if you have the courage to write it on a piece of paper and subject it to objective reality, you can easily establish it's not true. It's overgeneralized, it's decontextualized, and it's just way, way over the top. It's catastrophically over the top. Now, here's the thing. Why is it people, and when you look at the Facebook groups and things, you know, and as I say, I get comments on that. Why is it that so many people seem to suffer from chronic problems and yet don't seem to do anything much effective about them? You know, why do these chronic issues exist? And I think one of the reasons we could kind of, well, a thought that I have is that people are not setting themselves a goal to get rid of whatever problem that they have. And they're probably not setting themselves a goal because they don't, let's say they don't know how to do it, or they haven't come across a system to be able to do it. Now, if you came to my office and you said, there we've got, I've got funding for 10 or 12 sessions of CBT with you, severely clinically anxious and moderately clinically depressed. Do you think we can get to like cured, like not anxious, not depressed in 12 sessions? And I would go, well, you know, if you're prepared to do the homework and if you really put some effort into it, yeah, I would think we can do that. And reliably, I will do that. I would expect everyone to be cured, you know, and I say cured in terms of the questionnaires that we use, right? Clinical cutoffs of the questionnaire, right? So I would reliably expect to cure people of anxiety, depression all the time. I mean, occasionally you can't, you know, for one reason or another. But hi, Gillian. I've got a gift for you, Gillian. By the way, I'll tell you in a second. Right. So what's the difference between people, let's say, out there in the internet and people who come to my office? Well, I think it's a matter of commitment. People who come to the office and they're prepared to spend the money for, let's say, 10 sessions, which would be in the region of £1,200, they're committing to the process of doing it. And in the first instance, we establish a goal, right? What's your goal? Is your goal to be free of depression, anxiety? Yes. Okay, we'll make that a goal. And I think that what happens is in this internet world is that we fail to make a goal that is kind of ambitious enough to be kind of like inspiring and robust enough. And it's something that we really, really want, right? We fail to make a goal. And if you haven't got a goal that you're working towards, in a sense, it doesn't matter what you do. If you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which way you turn. Okay. So I think that's one of the things that we need to do. Now, when we have our goal, so we've changed our mindset, we're going to recognize that we're not the problem, but we have a problem. We're going to recognize that we have to change the beliefs we have. We have to use tools. And I was thinking about this. If you think about the way CBT works, is that there are fundamentally 4 elements that we tend to talk about, you know, kind of repetitively: cognitions, emotions, sensations, and behaviors. So cognitive behavior, cognitions, and behaviors. Now, typically we focus on cognitions and behaviors because we have access to thinking and we have access to what we do. And so I was thinking about how to offer you a tool that you could use in those 4 domains. Because once we got a mindset shift and once we have a goal that we can work towards, we need to do some, we want to be able to have the potential to do something in these 4 domains. And so I have a few things for you. And interestingly, the great thing about what I do is I'm always learning. And I just learned this. I wasn't aware of this, but here's a little tool for you. Most anxiety problems, and certainly panic problems, include an element of poor breathing. And you'll find breathing tools in Anxiety Wizards and whatnot. But here's an interesting one that I wasn't aware of. If you inhale longer than you exhale, it tends to make you more anxious. If you exhale longer than you inhale, it tends to make you less anxious. And I think this is an interesting tool, because what happens, how they discovered this, they had people like working as pairs, right? And so one person would be an observer and one person would be doing the exercise. So one person would be inhaling long and exhaling short, and the observer would say, how do you feel? Like, what are you thinking? And the person who is doing the long inhalation would say, I don't know if I'm doing it right. It feels like I'm feels like I'm being judged. You know, they'd be actually manifesting anxiety from a long inhalation and a short exhalation. But then when you turn it over, they feel more accepting, more kind of centered, a little bit more in control. So that's the first tool. I'm going to call that an emotion tool. Okay. Shorter inhalation, longer exhalation. And I'm going to say twice as long an exhalation as you have for an inhalation. So if you inhale for 4, you exhale for 8, that kind of thing. Now, why not do it as an experiment and let me know how you get on with it? Okay. So if you were to find yourself in an anxious situation, try this experiment. Inhale for 4 or 3, whatever's comfortable for you. Inhale and then exhale for twice that amount of time, and just sit with it. Just to sit with that experience, see what difference it makes. Oh, you do that in yoga. Okay, well, I'm you know more than me, Gillian, and also you, Louise. I wasn't aware of that one. I'm aware of some other things, but I wasn't aware of that one. Now, do you remember I was saying that your mind is actually commentating on things which are already predetermined by your brain? So your internal commentary is actually commentating on history. Okay. So, but your internal commentary interprets your experiences. So if you were frightened, for instance, if you were anxious about, let's say, going on the motorway, you're kind of running an anxiety equation. And this is how it goes. You remember my catchphrase is anxiety is an overestimation of threat. Okay, but we can also put something on the other side of that equation. Anxiety is an overestimation of threat and danger. It's an underestimation of your coping resources. So do you remember I said that you're not actually frightened of a motorway, you're frightened of your response should you find yourself on a motorway or think about a motorway. So you're frightened that your coping ability is poor. That's the second part of the anxiety equation, right? So how might we strengthen your coping resources? Well, we would change your cognitive interpretation of your experience. So if you think about the motorway and you feel anxious, you might say, oh God, I wouldn't be able to cope with that. Okay. Is that actually true? Does that actually reflect your real ability to cope with things? I have talked to many people who have all sorts of experiences, and basically they would say, I'm really frightened of hospitals, but my father had a heart attack and I was in the hospital and I was absolutely fine. Right, okay. I'm absolutely terribly phobic of blood. I'm terribly phobic of blood. My son cut his finger and he had to have like 16 stitches in his finger, but I was absolutely fine because, you know, it was my son. Okay, so we're underestimating our ability to cope, right? That's the second part of the equation. We're overestimating the threat and we're underestimating our ability to cope. So what we have to do, therefore, is to change our coping. Oh, I couldn't possibly cope with that. How many things have you coped with in your life? And I'll tell you this for an absolute fact. If something serious happened to someone that you cared about, you'd cope perfectly well. You wouldn't have any problem at all because you'd be actually solving an external world problem. Remember, all anxiety is an internal world problem, right? Oh, but I can't cope in here. I can't cope in here. Yeah, okay. But that's not what you mean when you say that. You say, I can't cope. You don't mean I can't cope in here. You mean I can't cope out there. But actually, out there, you can cope. But why don't you learn that you can cope, right? Why do you have a struggle learning that you can cope? Well, what do you think? Why do you have a struggle learning that you can cope? What do you think? What would be the answer? Anyone got a thought? I'll take a drink of my tea. Hi, Gillian. Hi, Patricia. Why do you feel that you have a hard time learning that you can cope better than you believe you can? Why do you think that might be? Anyone got a thought? It's an interesting one because it's the second part of the equation, right? We've already established, and if you've done stuff with me before, you'll know that I use a very powerful mantra. I am safer than I feel I am, because you are safer than you feel. That's just just true, right? But the other part is the part that I haven't really put much emphasis on so far, is that you are more able to cope than you believe. Well, the answer is, nice one, Jenna, fear. Yeah, well, the answer is that you make decisions based on fear. And by that I mean you avoid stuff that you're frightened of. And therefore, you never get a chance to realize that you can cope better than you think you can. But when something happens to someone you care about, you just cope with it because you can, right? It's just when you have an opportunity to make a choice based on fear that you choose to avoid. And therefore you never learn, or you don't learn, or it's harder to learn, that actually you're far better able to cope than you feel you are, than you believe you are, right? So this brings us right away back to mindset shift, right? You are better able to cope than you believe. If I was you, I would take, after this, I'd take some moments, I'd think about it, I'd write down, go, how many things have I coped with in my life? And actually, am I about the same as everybody else with respect to coping? I mean, am I weaker than anybody else? Well, I feel weaker. Yeah, but am I actually weaker? I feel like I can't cope. Yeah, but can you cope? Yeah, right? Okay. Behavior. And it kind of, I've just alluded to it in a sense, right? If you want to move your life forward, you stop making decisions based on fear and you start approaching the things that you are frightened of. Now, that little bit of like those couple of sentences there is almost in its entirety the whole of behavior therapy with respect to anxiety, right? The big thing that keeps your anxiety in place is that you avoid things. Okay. Behavior therapy strategy is approach things that you're frightened of. Do not make decisions based on fear. Now, I know it's easy to say, but that's behavior therapy, right? It's a very, very powerful solution. We simply change our attitude to the problem, right? I am not the problem, but I have a problem. My problem is I have anxiety. Okay. Therefore, and it's an internal world problem. So in fact, the world outside is not at all threatening. The world at large has no threat in it. Well, no more threat than anybody else, right? So I'm not anxious. The world is the same for me as it is for you. So the world is not threatening. I am not the problem. I have a problem. My problem is internal reality. Therefore, the world is not threatening. Therefore, I'm going to reprogram myself by approaching things I'm frightened of, not avoiding them. Because every time I avoid, I'm making a decision based on fear, and that makes my problem worse, or at least maintains my problem. And every time I challenge that, I reduce my anxiety by a bit, and I get stronger. I feel more able to cope, and I feel more in emotional control. How does all that sound? Well, the reason you fall apart after you cope, Donnie, is because you allow yourself to catastrophize and think about it. Yeah, I did it this time, but what will happen next time? That's a negative thought, right? We've got to challenge these. And the final one is sort of a sensation tool. And I came across this one. It's a variation of breathing that I wasn't aware of. Imagine this. Imagine that your nostrils are in the center of your chest, just about where your heart is, right? So imagine that your nostrils have been transplanted to about the center of your heart. And so imagine what it would be like to breathe in and breathe out in that location, just in the center of your heart, okay? And it's an interesting exercise, and I've been practicing a little bit, and I can start to feel a distance, sort of a difference. I can start to feel a little bit more expansive in my chest, a little bit more, let's say, open, okay? Now, that directly, to feel open and to feel expansive, I've actually got to change my sensation, my physiology. And so it's often the case, really, that wherever you put your attention, it makes a physiological change. So I've done things with people, I've made people believe that the hand is hot simply by focus your attention on your hand and imagine what it would feel like if it was hot. I'll tell you a funny one. Many years ago, I was doing some like a little bit of a hypnosis workshop with students when I was teaching on the doctoral program in London. And I was running them through the Stanford hypnotizability test, where you give people little tests, right? So you say, okay, imagine a lemon in your mouth. And then this girl says, oh, well, yeah, this is fun, but I can't be hypnotized. I said, that's fine. Just go through the process. And you get an insight for it, because I was training people to be psychologists like myself. I said, imagine that the sun is on the back of your hand. Imagine the sun's so really, really hot, and there might even be a magnifying glass magnifying the sun on the back of your hand. She jumped up and she ran out to put her hand under the cold tap. So the girl thought she couldn't be hypnotized. Her hand was burning, and I was just standing there in the lecture theatre, just talking. Okay, so it's being able to imagine something. It puts attention on it, and it changes it. It changes it in ways that are really rather interesting. And I'll just bring that around to anxiety. A lot of times we want to avoid feeling our anxiety. We want to avoid feeling our panic. And it is the case that sometimes avoidance is typically a bad strategy. But what would happen if you actually felt your anxiety? What happens if you actually allow your anxiety to exist, and you just allowed it to be there, and you accepted it instead of fighting it? It's always a bad idea to fight, because it puts energy into the problem. So that's just a different way of thinking about it, Hi, Colette, Michael. To accept the sensation. Now, so the heart-based breathing, and accept the sensation that comes from that as an experiment, and just changing the way your body feels. Now, Gillian sent a question over about fibromyalgia, and I asked her for a bit more information about how it feels. And if I recollect, she said headache, pain, discomfort, and fatigue. Okay, so fibromyalgia is, it's a. I'm not going to talk about fibromyalgia per se. It's just a cluster of problems, but there are two techniques which are relatively simple and relatively useful. Now, I know, Gillian, you're in the Anxiety Wizard, so you're working through the course. That's fine. Go to the, I think it's module 3, and I know you already do the EFT, which is the tapping, and you find that useful. But there's another technique which is useful, and it's hypnosis. And hypnosis is a form of, I'd say, powerful visual imagery applied to some service that you're trying to achieve, right? Now, I don't have you here, so we can't do hypnosis, but what I've done is I've made a hypnosis guided visual imagery audio for you, and I think it's about 17-18 minutes, and I've put it up on the Dr Purves online page, and for everybody who's on this Facebook call, you can have it. It's free. I've made it for you today. I've spent the large part of the day doing it, and you can have it. So simply click on the link. It's on an Amazon link. So it's called Using Your Imagination to Feel Better. Now, I've focused it around feeling healed, resourced, comforted, removing tension, removing headache, removing pain and discomfort. And I'm kind of thinking towards the autoimmune, towards the fibromyalgia, and towards the sort of, I don't feel very good. Okay, so use this, download this. I'll be taking it down tomorrow, because it's not just for everybody. I thought it'd be nice for you as a sort of a gift for joining me, and say thank you for coming. Download it onto your own device, and I would suggest that you practice with it a bit. I've used this particular guided imagery quite a lot to help with numbness, loss of nerve sensation, and I won't say pain exactly, but that feeling of loss of sensation, really, coming from nerve damage. Okay, and the remarkable thing is, after this, feel great. It's back again. Fantastic. So I've had really, really good results with this particular guided imagery. So I thought I'd share it with you. Okay. Starting on the 9th of March, we have GAD week, Generalized Anxiety Disorder week, coming back up. And that's, it's the same as the GAD week that we ran about a month ago, I guess, maybe. So if you want to jump into GAD week, it's completely free. Every day there are videos and audios that will take you through the process of really understanding generalized anxiety disorder and using some tools to overcome it. Now, what would be fantastic would be to have everybody do it together as a community, right? So we can share our experiences. I'll be jumping in. I'm always in anyway, but I'll be jumping backwards and forwards, ask questions, say, what about this, Dave? This happened. What do I need to do? And I'll share what I know about it. And you can then, try it, experiment, see what goes on. So GAD week starts, it'll be in the Mental Health Wizard Facebook group. And that starts on the 9th of March. So you need to be on the Mental Health Wizard Facebook group. And if you know anybody who has a GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, is anxiety. Okay, it's the classic form of anxiety. So if you know anyone who's anxious, or if you're in any groups or anything, and you think people would benefit from do a focused self-help CBT week on GAD, which is free, you just have to jump in and use it. Please share it, because the more people we have involved, the more people get helped, and the more things are more interesting and more community based for everybody. Okay, so now the final kind of step on this why it seems hard to shake anxiety is that you have to persist until you reach your goal. Now I know that people have physical problems, as hi Tim, physical problems and other kinds of things as well, but still anxiety is not necessary. Virtually nobody needs to be anxious. Certainly no one needs to have panic. Virtually no one needs to be depressed. Now, in fairness, there's perhaps some genetic elements to things, but still, no one needs to be depressed or anxious. And so you've got to make a goal that gets your attention. It seems worthwhile. You're prepared to invest in and stick with it until you reach your goal. Well, then reach out, twist something around, change something, get something else, and keep with it, right? Take it to the point at which you're no longer anxious and no longer depressed. Why not? What else is more important to you than your mental health? Well, lots of things, I guess. But in principle, right? If you think about it, what's more important than being happy? What's more important than being able to do the things that you want to do? What's more important than feeling good? And I put a thing out last week, which is really interesting, or maybe Monday, about mortality. Now, it turns out that in America, a mental health issue is likely to reduce your life expectancy by 10.1 years. That's the median figure, so it's not the average, it's the most frequently occurring number, median. 10.1 years. What? 10.1 years. Now, when I used to do quality of life studies, a year of poor ill health was worth, it's costed in terms of economics of about £30,000, right? So 10 years, 10.1 years, that's like £300,000 cost, loss and cost. Wow. Plus, of course, you don't get those years to enjoy yourself. So in my email, I said, well, I've got a nice investment for you. Spend a year getting rid of depression, anxiety, and then enjoy the next 9.1 years of extra life you get from having done that. Seems to me to be good advice. Louise Carolyn says she can't find the link. The link is on this page, so it's it should be on the drpurves.online page. And once I finish this Facebook Live, I'll just make sure it's there, and I'll leave it up for the rest of the night because it's for you guys, really. Okay, it's not just for general use. Okay, the final thing is this. If you're not an anxiety wizard, why not? You have to have a program which will take you on the journey and will take you the whole way. Otherwise, it's fiddling and it's faffing. And however much you might like my videos and other kinds of things, that's not a structured program. So my suggestion is get onto the Anxiety Wizard Self-Help CBT program. It's free to start. It's less than £10 a week when your subscription kicks in. You can cancel at any time, and you have access to everything that I know. And plus, once you join the Anxiety Wizard, you can join the Anxiety Wizard private Facebook group, and I'm happy to have conversations with you and help you to tweak things, to move things along, help you to get unstuck, etc. So GAD Week starts the 9th of March. Please, I'd really appreciate it if you share it so we have more people involved. And if you're not an Anxiety Wizard, jump on it, and I'd like to see you inside. Make a goal and get rid of anxiety, depression. Why not? Why not? You're just going to make the journey. The thing is, you're making the journey anyway. You might as well make the journey useful to you and have a good time along the way, and make the journey longer by feeling better and getting rid of mental health problems. So that's it for me now. Jennifer says, how do I stop overanalyzing? Well, many things are habits, right? I would suggest just press on with a stop exercise. Just use the stop, but persist with it for at least 2 weeks. It typically takes 2 to 3 weeks to stop your brain from worrying. So if you do the exercise, stick with it, and you should be able to manage that. And it will certainly turn it down, right? It'll turn the volume of the worry down. And what I mean by that is it will reduce the frequency by which you have worries. And if you can reduce the frequency by which you have a worry or worries, right? If you can do that, well, if you do a bit more, it reduces it again. And if you do a bit more, it reduces again, right? When I'm working with people who have PTSD, and I use perspective as a metaphor, which is kind of interesting, right? I say the worst thing that's happened to you with respect to the thing, right? How close to you does it seem? And I go like this. And if it's PTSD, they typically go, it's in my face, it's here, right? It's like it's just happened. Okay. And how long ago did it happen? 6 years. And it feels here. Okay. So it's in your face. So the worst thing that's ever happened to you is in your face. So you know why you're feeling horrendous, right? Okay. But then we do some exercises, some visual imagery exercises, EMDR, etc. And I say, okay, that picture, the worst thing that's happened to you, right? Where's that? How close is that picture now? And they might go, well, we've done some work. They might say, well, it's here now. Okay. Okay. So it's a bit further away. Yes. Do you know what the hardest distance to move an intrusive image is? Anyone got an idea? What's the hardest distance to move an intrusive image? Well, I ask these questions. Of course, you've got to read my mind to figure it out, right? 1 inch. If you can move an intrusive image from here to here, who's in charge of the image? You are. Well, if you can move it 1 inch, you can move it 2 inches. And I have a big window in my office, and there are trees and another building over the far side, right? I say, okay, let's make a goal to get this intrusive image, which is the worst thing that's ever happened to you and it's been haunting you for 6 years. Let's put it on that building over there. If you can move it 1 inch, you can move it 2. And they go, yeah, you're right. Okay, well, let's do it. And so you just have to recognize that there's always a tool that you can use to change your experience. And you'll find most of those tools in Anxiety Wizard. Okay, so that is it for me for today. Thank you very much for joining. We have another one as part of GAD Week on March the 12th. So I'll be talking about GAD, and we'll be taking questions about anxiety, generalized anxiety, and the anxiety disorder, the GAD Week. So be sure to post questions for that. So I'll see you again on a Facebook Live on March the 12th at 7 p.m. Thank you very much, and please share all this stuff with people who you think might find it useful.